Okay, so really quickly, I just finished Chapter 2's video. I'm going to go ahead and do Chapter 3 and 4, hopefully, today. So I'm wearing the same clothes, not because I'm dirty, but because we are seconds after the previous video. So, and we're going to look at Chapter 3 today, which I don't have as many notes, so this one should be even shorter, but this is one of the, like, really, really big sections, iconic scenes here in the movie, particularly the most recent movie. This section was very beautifully done. I feel like the director of that movie, I think it was Baz Luhrmann. I'm not positive about that. I could have completely butchered that, but I think it was. He was very true to what the book describes, all right? So, look, honestly, this party would put anything we have today to shame. It really would. They describe it as the people there being like moths among the whisperings and the champagne and the stars. This is, again, what makes Fitzgerald a genius. That is very few words. It's not about length of words or paragraphs. It's about using the right word to convey the right meaning and to give the right just feel. And the idea of people being described as moths, think about the softness here. Moths, whispering, starlight, champagne, just all of this imagery together just has a magical quality to it. And I don't think anyone else does it like Fitzgerald does. Now, I'm not going to waste 10 minutes going into how much I love Fitzgerald. I know you don't want to hear that again, but just that description kind of sets the tone for the beginning of this chapter. The parties get so wild that it points out that each week staff has to come in after the weekend and repair damage that's been done. He has to hire even extra staff to repair the damage. And this isn't just like after somebody's crazy graduation party. It's every week. That's wild, okay? He gives a detail about a bunch of fruit. Now, for us today, that might not mean anything. So what? He has crates of fruit brought in that after the end of the weekend, the halves that all the pulp has been taken out of are there to be thrown away. But in this time period, fruit would have been a luxury, and it would have been fairly expensive. And the fact that Gatsby's using it to make cocktails and then throwing away what's probably still some edible parts, he's just throwing them away because they're no longer parts of his drink for the drinks. So that again shows how much he's spending. It's just a detail that Fitzgerald added that's probably been lost on the times. It says at least once a fortnight they decorate it as if it was Christmas. They have tents, they have lights, they go through all of just a whole 9 yards to make this thing look great. By the way, a fortnight is every 2 weeks. So, you know, twice a month he's throwing even a bigger party. He has a full orchestra, not some four-piece thing that just plays casual music in the background. A full orchestra, which is a lot of people. And he even has entertainment, like acrobats and stuff there. This is disgusting spending. All right? Look, it's really easy to read this book and like Gatsby, but the more and more you study parts of it, the more and more he comes off like a really bad person. And this is one of the things that really hits me. The spending he's doing here. And guys, I'm going to be honest with you. I have this in the notes for next chapter, but I'm going to say it now. The whole purpose of these parties is he's hoping Daisy will show up. He's not even invited her. It's just he hopes that she'll show up. So he has to make the parties as gaudy and ridiculous as possible so people will show up. Because to be honest with you, as Nick points out, none of these people are invited. Nick's one of the only people that are invited. Everyone else just shows up to see the spectacle that are these parties. It's unbelievable. He talks about how people that are there don't even know each other. They meet each other. They forget each other right away. This is an experience. It is described as an amusement park, and that's what it is. And again, it may seem magical and beautiful because, like I said, the wording at the original part, sorry about that stutter, originally, but here's the real problem. If you should have a lot more issues with it than that. It's a problem. It's not something that we should be proud of. And as I wrote in my notes, this is dirty rich. I mean, this is so rich you're just shoveling money out. All right? And I think Fitzgerald's meaning for this to look that way. He's not trying to say, look how much money that Gatsby has, and look how awesome this is. I think he wants us to be repulsed by it. And sane people are, to be honest with you, all right? Nick does point out that he's one of the only invited guests, and the rest of these people are here because they've heard about this spectacle, which is crazy. I mean, you know, no matter how wild your parties may get, you don't have it to the point where people are driving from miles and miles away just because they heard how crazy it was. If that's the case, you need to get that under control, all right? It says many of the people, most in fact, don't even know who Gatsby is. In fact, they can't recognize him. Gatsby spends a majority of these parties off by himself. Gatsby's not even a drinker. He's off by himself just watching people, hoping to see Daisy show up at some point. He knows nothing. He doesn't want anything to do with interacting with these people, which is, again, this spending massive amounts of money. Again, money that could be life-altering for people. You know, I've talked about this before. He's throwing away generational wealth, to be honest with you, just in a hope that he can run into Daisy again, which is just ridiculous. She lives a few miles away. He could easily just go and see her. But, you know, he's choosing to throw this money away. And this is really neat that it's juxtaposed with the Valley of Ashes, which was the last chapter. So we see, like, just debasing poverty, and then we see this massive debauchery with these people here, and it's supposed to be disgusting. You know, we talk about the wealth gap today in our world. We talk about how the upper class have so much money, and then we have people who can't even afford to, you know, have a house above them, and it should be something that disturbs you. I'm not trying to turn into a social justice person here, but the fact is that it's true. Okay, I mean, we have a problem here in our country, and it's just not in 2020. It was in the 1920s too, and probably in some ways before that even. While they're at the party, we see Jordan again, and again Fitzgerald uses the word contemptuous with her, which is like her defining feature. She just talks down about everyone. She's that kind of person who, you know, even when she's talking, you know, what seems like she's talking pleasantly, she's still got that sneer in her voice. All right. We also get tons of rumors about Gatsby floating around this party. He's killed somebody. He's a spy. He's like suspiciously generous. Like some girl rips her dress and he buys her another one and has it sent to her. And not just like a $20 job here. We're talking about she said it was $200 something, but if you take the inflation into account, that's in the thousands today. So ridiculous amounts of spending. Nick calls it romantic speculation about him, which I love that term. Romantic here not meaning ooh, you know, gaga goo goo love nonsense, but about romantic as in it just seems, again, I use this word a lot, but it seems almost magical. All right. So Nick and Jordan go looking for Gatsby at this point because, you know, they're bored, Jordan particularly, and they want to find this, you know, guy who everyone talks about. On the way, they run into the library. Very weird scene. Most of you probably were confused by it. There's this guy in there who, to be honest with you, as much as I've studied this book, he's still an enigma to me. He shows up in the library. If I remember right, he's the same guy who wrecks the car at the end of this chapter, and I think he's also the man who ends up one of the few people that comes to Gatsby's funeral at the end. It's a weird character. Fitzgerald obviously meant for him to mean something, but Mr. Morse is lost on what it could be. But he's fascinated by the books in the library. And what makes them so fascinating? Books belong in a library. Why is this interesting? Well, because they're real books. And while that, again, may seem silly to you, the wealthy people then and in some ways even today, let's just be honest, are about appearances. So this library would have had a bunch of the really expensive, fancy books with the gilded leather covers. But a lot of the times they would buy fake books that would look really good on the shelves, but there was nothing actually in them. Because real books would have been, you know, prohibitively expensive to fill a library with, especially if they were that kind of binding and stuff. So this man in there, called the Owl-Eyed Man, eventually, if it's not in this chapter, I know they call him that later, is the stuff, he's amazed that this is real. And it is. It's actual books. And yeah, it looks like they've never been touched before. So not only is Gatsby about the appearance, he's taking it even farther. All right. So again, there's this. It's even with the rich. They look good on it. The books are representative of the wealthy. They look good on the outside. They're where they belong as far as the books in the library, but inside they're empty. And again, that's kind of the image that Fitzgerald's presenting of wealth. Remember, again, I've pointed this out in several videos. Fitzgerald was wealthy, so he is insulting his own. This isn't one of those things like where Mr. Morse is talking bad about it and wrote a book about the rich, because I don't have a yacht or a summer home. I barely have a home. So it wouldn't mean as much coming from me as it does from Fitzgerald. Eventually, Nick starts having a conversation with a stranger who seems to recognize him from the war, and Nick just casually gets into a conversation with him, and then he all of a sudden realizes, or the guy he's talking to realizes that, oh, you don't know who I am. I'm Gatsby. So, I mean, it's just this like really humbling moment where Nick's like, oh crap, you're Gatsby, the Gatsby. I mean, he's not where he would expect him to be. You would expect a guy like this to be mingling with all of the people, all of his guests, and he's not. He's off to the side because he doesn't belong in this group. Look, Gatsby has no intention of wanting to be one of these people. The only reason he wants anything to do with being wealthy or being part of this crew is so that he can get Daisy back. His entire life is about this girl. It's an obsession, all right? We also get the over and over and over abundance of old sports. That starts. This is Nick is constantly referred to as old sport by Gatsby, so we're going to see that thousands of times in this book. I'm exaggerating, but it's a lot. You see it about 10 times right here in this chapter. We get all right, let me back up. I want to turn to this page. I wrote notes about pages I want to read. This is our first real description of Gatsby. And listen to how romantic and just magical. Again, I use the term magical a lot because the term romantic, you automatically go to so-and-so loves so-and-so. And that's not what we mean by the term romantic. Romantic is more about the concept of something being magical and special and powerful beyond what's normal, almost supernatural, not just love, although that obviously comes into a lot of romantic type things. All right, so here we go. Listen to this. He smiled understandingly, much more than understandingly. It was one of those rare smiles with the quality of eternal reassurance in it that you may come across 4 or 5 times in life. It faced, or seemed to face, the whole external world for an instant, and then concentrated on you with an irresistible prejudice in your favor. It understood you just as far as you wanted to be understood, believed in you as if you would like to believe in yourself, and assured you that it had precisely the impression of you that at your best you hope to convey. And that's powerful language. And again, there's no big fancy words in there, but it's just pointing out that Gatsby's one of those guys that when you see him, he lights up a room, and he makes you feel like all of the things you wish you were, he makes you feel like you are those things. This is charisma times 1,000. This guy is a special individual in general, all right? It's part of why what happens in this book is such a waste, because Gatsby's a character who could have been, world-changing, to be honest with you, but his obsession is on a girl instead of, doing something bigger than that. So, anyway, Jordan says a neat line afterwards. She talks about large parties being intimate and small parties where you have no privacy. And it seems kind of like paradoxical. Large parties are intimate? No, they shouldn't be. But again, paradoxes are something fun to analyze, because when you really think about it, she's right. Think about it. At a big party, you don't associate with all of the people. You kind of clump into your little group, and it may be 1 or 2 or 3 people that you kind of glom onto and hang out with, and everything else that's going on around you just kind of helps mask your conversation. But at a small party, everybody can hear what you're saying. So it's kind of interesting that at this big party you actually can be alone, it seems. So neat little side note here. Again, I point out Gatsby spends most of this party on the stairs, just watching people, which, again, may seem like a romantic image of him sitting there waiting for the person he loves, but really, if we step outside of it, it's a little bit on the creepy side, and we're going to talk more about that in the next chapter, okay? We also see that as this party gets further and further into the night, the way people behave here is kind of disturbing. We see women fighting with their husbands. We see husbands kind of, eyeballing other women and kind of like, now I wouldn't say directly cheating on their wives. We see stuff like that. We see a lot of really poor behavior on the part of his party guests. To be honest with you, one of the things I think Fitzgerald's pushing is the wealthy behave much in the same poor way that you would associate with the poor. So, and one of the things I think that this book does a really good job of is showing that the rich and the poor are not as different as they like to pretend like they are. In fact, they're just miserable in different ways. But a lot of their life, they still, fall in love. They still become obsessed with people. They still have problems. It's just they're different problems. And really, if we realize we were closer than we think, maybe we wouldn't have as many problems as we do, to be honest with you. As this chapter closes, there's this weird scene with there being an accident out front. I know this seems like a bit of a stretch, But later on, we're going to see Jordan and Nick. In fact, at the end of this chapter, we're going to see them talking about this real imagery about careless drivers. And they don't mean literally careless drivers, even though that's what happens here. We have this guy who's gotten drunk. He gets in his car, and he busts up and crashes into something on the way out. The man from the library is involved in this wreck. But I think it's meant to foreshadow this conversation that Nick and Jordan are about to have. Remember, foreshadowing is something that you really don't pick up on unless you've done multiple readings. It's hard to do on a one-read element, except that Fitzgerald does do a good job of pushing it right next to each other. So let me look at 56 and page 56 and 57 in my book. There's another really good prose section. Let's read this. Oh, yeah, I love this part. Again, this has nothing to do with the car wreck, but I just want you to hear what beautiful writing sounds like. It says, at the enchanted metropolitan twilight, I felt a haunting loneliness sometimes, and felt it in others. Poor young clerks who loitered in front of windows waiting until it was time for a solitary restaurant dinner. Young clerks in the dusk wasting the most poignant moments of night and life. I mean, what's happening here is we're getting some time passage between Gatsby's party and his conversation with Jordan about careless drivers. But he's talking about, his life as he's a working guy. He's a clerk. And he's single. I mean, him and Jordan are not really a thing, but, he's single. He notices all these people who go to work and then are lonely and spending nights waiting so that they can eat by themselves and go back to their lonely apartments and then do it all again. And it's a really interesting image and kind of a powerful image. And again, the diction is what makes it powerful. I mean, me just describing it to you right there has no power, but his wording describing the exact same thing is just beautiful. All right. Okay, as the chapter ends, we get this conversation about the car wreck. And let me read this part to you, too, because I think it's kind of cool wording. He's talking about, we get a little more characterization of Jordan here, too, finding out she cheats at golf, and she's really just a dishonest person in general. But as they're going someplace, we see how bad of a driver she is. Sorry about the alerts dinging. I'm sorry. I should have turned off the volume. She says it takes two to make an accident because Nick's just pointed how bad of a driver she is. And let me back up. So you're a rotten driver, I protested. Either you ought to be more careful or you oughtn't drive at all. I am careful. No, you're not. Well, other people are, she said lightly. Well, what's that got to do with it? They'll keep out of my way, she insisted. It takes two to make an accident. And that's a really cool line. Think about it. She's got a point. All right? If one person's a really bad driver and the other one's a good one, often the good one can swerve out of the way and prevent the accident. But if two bad drivers come together, we've got chaos. And Nick says, suppose you met somebody just as careless as yourself. I hope I never will, she answered. I hate careless people. That's why I like you. So she points out, Nick's a safe bet. He's not a careless driver. So hopefully her ridiculousness, he'll be able to, he'll be able to balance that out, is her point. Now, this is going to come back again towards the end of the book when we see Nick and Jordan break up. That's such a weird word for what happens. But she points out that, it takes two to make an accident, so you need... And again, this is going to parallel a lot of the relationships in this book. When we see Gatsby and Daisy, we have two careless drivers, Tom and Daisy, two careless drivers, and wreckage is all that surrounds these couples, okay? He says, I'm skipping a little. I've been writing letters once a week and signing them, love, Nick. And all I could think of was how, when that certain girl played tennis, a faint mustache of perspiration appeared upon her lips. He's talking about, he has a girlfriend back home. And he's like, so petty that all he thinks about is, ooh, when she plays tennis, she gets sweat right in here. Which, such a minor thing to be bugged by. Guys, Nick's a bit of a annoyance in this book, too. A lot of people that read this find him to be a grating character. And by grating, I mean he gets on your nerves, okay? He says, nevertheless, there was a vague understanding that it had to be tactfully broken off before I was free. So he's pointing out, I realize that I have to break it off with her before I can really start something with Jordan because I'm such a good guy, ha. He says, everyone suspects himself at least one of the cardinal virtues, and this is mine. Oh, this line, because I'm one of the few honest people that I have ever known. Wow, he thinks a lot of himself. All right? The thing is he's really not as honest as he thinks he is. He lies to himself constantly. Even the most honest of us have problems with that. So, well, that ends chapter 3, and now it's going to get us really into some more movement with this book. There's still a lot of conflict being laid into place. We already know that Tom's cheating on his wife. I've kind of hinted around, although if you read the book without watching videos, you might not have caught on yet. Daisy and Gatsby are going to be a thing, and we're going to see that develop in the next chapter, I believe. And you know, we're just starting to see a little bit. Now, this type of writing is not going to be filled with these big climactic moments, okay? That's really not what it's about. It's a much more internal book, talking about what we see going on within people, and a lot more thematic things being developed, not so much plot things being developed. So one of you actually came up to me before school started and was like, I don't see the purpose in why this book was written. And if you're a person who relies on plot to carry the novel, then you're going to feel that way. This book is not about some big exciting story. The story itself is actually fairly bland. Yes, there's some murder and intrigue in it, but really it seems like an afterthought because the book has got so much more going on in it, and you have to read carefully to pick it up. So, but you're lucky. You've got these videos to help you go through it. So we're going to finish this, and then we're going to look. I'm going to stop this, and then I'm going to go ahead and film chapter 4. So hopefully I'll see you back for that, you know, next time I see you. All right. Have a great evening.